Welcome, everyone, and good night. And thanks for joining us this evening for our bfoUP webinar. We're so happy you could join us this evening. I'd like to welcome Ryan Goodman for the evening. We're very happy he could join us this evening. But just before we get started, I'd like to just do a few little announcements for BFO. Just to get started, if you have missed any past webinars and are interested in seeing them, we've had quite a few, so feel free to check those out on our website. You can check them out on ontariobeef.com. You can find those there. You can also take a look at some of our Beef Symposium videos that are now available. So if you weren't able to take part in the Beef Symposium in January, those videos are up and available on the website as well. So those are a great chance to go and check out some of the speakers we had for that. Along with that, if you're interested in any Ontario CAF clubs, those are starting to get a little more popular and people asking and being interested in those. BFO put together some videos over the summer. Dan Ferguson, along with our summer student, Robert McKinley, helped put those together and went out over the province and talked to people. So those are also available on our website and are really well done. So if you wanted to take a look, you can definitely go and check those out. Along with this, on a national level, the Cattlemen's Young Leaders applications are going on right now, so the deadline is March 31st. This is a really great program if you're looking for mentorship and networking, a great chance to go and learn more. So the applications are going on right now. If you're looking for information, feel free to reach out to myself or Jacqueline Hornberg or Dan Ferguson. They have lots of information that we can share about this program with you, and we'd be happy to do so. And as always, you can find information on our website, sign up for our weekly e-newsletter, the bulletin board. Members receive our magazine 5 times a year, and always find us on social media. So we always have lots of information there. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Ryan Goodman. We're very, very happy that he was able to find the time for us this year. A lot of you may have heard of him as the Beef Runner on social media, and he has had lots of experience as a beef advocate across North America. So we were very happy that he was able to find that time for us this year. So I will change the presenter here and let you take it away, Ryan. So thanks again for joining us.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much. And I'm glad to be able to be joining y'all virtually tonight. Unfortunately, I can't be there in person, but the day will come when we're able to join in person again. And I can hopefully join, everyone for some great conversations and some great chats. But for tonight, on the webinar tonight, I'm going to be sharing some tips and lessons that I have learned through more than a decade of advocacy, jumping online and working with advocates across North America and being able to do some of that. And as we go throughout this, if you want to give me a shout out on social media, along with the Beef Farmers of Ontario tags, you can find me online as Beef Runner on any of your channels. Or feel free to drop any questions into the chat because they're definitely going to try to address some of those throughout or at the end of the presentation at the session tonight, and definitely want to answer any of the questions that you have, because when we get talking about advocacy, it can just span so many different areas and depending on your involvement. So definitely want to address any of the questions that you have. I have some that were submitted ahead of time and I definitely tried to incorporate those. But we will get to doing that. So let me jump right in to our presentation tonight. All right, and as I mentioned, if you want to reach out to me online, find me online. It's BeefRunner, befrunner.com, anywhere online. If you want to give me a shout out or send any messages following up, I'm definitely more than happy to answer any of those questions as you get there. So give you a little bit of a roadmap of where we're headed tonight. I'm going to talk a little bit about why agriculture advocacy. Why would that be important? Why did I get involved? And why should you consider to be involved as well? As a member of the agriculture community, why should we spend time talking about what it is that we do with people that are not involved in agriculture? And then to address some of the questions that I had coming into this webinar and share some of my experiences, I've got 3 keys to being a strong advocate. 3 things that I've learned throughout the years working with advocates all across the countries and all across the globe, and helping us to share our stories and things that I've learned in there. Some of them from the School of Hard Knocks, and some of them working with excellent spokespeople across the world. And then I want to close out with asking you, how will you be an advocate? That's kind of a take home tonight, some homework to work on afterwards is how can you apply these things that we're going to be discussing tonight through your own advocacy efforts. To give you a little bit more background on myself and where I come from, so I grew up in Arkansas on my family's cow, calf, and stocker operation, not far from Memphis, Tennessee. We had commercial Angus cows and stocker cattle, and we retained ownership on those cattle and to the feed yards in the West Texas and Oklahoma panhandles. And so I was very lucky from a young age to be able to experience such a broad array of the sectors of raising beef cattle, and able to experience, a large and diversified calving operation, and then work for Cactus and Five Rivers, which are two of the largest cattle feeding operations in the world, and was able to gain a very good experience in feeding cattle and nutrition in that as well. I went to school at Oklahoma State University and University of Tennessee, studying reproduction and nutrition in cattle. I guess you could say I love feeding and breeding cattle. Went and worked on several different ranches and farms, from large operations to small scale family operations, raising beef for natural beef programs. And that was a very good experience all the way from the Southeast to the Northern Rocky Mountain region, even working with several different Canadian ranchers out west on their marketing operations, and had that opportunity to learn how diversified our cattle community is from one end of the continent to the other. And I think that that's been a pretty incredible opportunity. Aside from working in production, I have had the opportunity to work in communications and work in advocacy. And I'll tell you a little bit more about kind of my light bulb moment here in a few minutes about what really helped me to dive into that. But what I have found throughout the years, and working for a state organization in Montana, working with some of the Western provinces, and then with our national organization here in the States, it's National Cattlemen's Beef Association, for the past decade, I have a great passion for working with members of our community, be that farmers, ranchers, people involved in retail, allied industry services, whatever that might be. I found a great opportunity and a great need to help our community with advocacy and communication skills, because over the last few decades, we haven't been very good at sharing our story and the innovations that happen in our adaptations to technology and how we're raising our animals and how we're caring for the land. And there's a lot of need for our industry to speak up and be a part of those conversations. And I've had the opportunity to work with advocates and members of our industry from all across the globe and part of that. And today, even though I'm working on a ranch in northern Colorado, and our bull sale is coming up here in a couple of weeks, and so staying busy with that, our technology today and access to internet allows me to continue that work to work with folks like yourself speaking here tonight and sharing some of those communication skills. And when I'm not working on the ranch and traveling and helping advocates and members of our industry in communication and advocacy, I have a bit of an addiction to running. That started when I was in grad school, and the local beer market had a 5K every Monday. And I'm like, heck yeah, I will run for a pint of beer. And as a grad student on a grad student budget, that was pretty handy. But then I moved up to Montana in the Rocky Mountains and started running on the trails and exploring the mountains out there. Some friends talked me into running a half marathon near Yellowstone National Park, and that was a pretty incredible experience. And the next summer, I ran my first marathon, and the following summer, I jumped right in and ran my first 50-mile race in the mountains of Western Montana. And ever since then, I've been running ultra marathons, which is 50K or longer. My longest distance to date is 100 kilometers on the Continental Divide in Idaho. And that's an incredibly long distance. I'm out there running for 16, 17 hours at a time. And when I'm out there, I'm connecting with other runners. We had a local trail race or some of the national races all across the country. I'm out there connecting with people from urban and suburban areas. And we're connecting as runners. We're talking as runners about what runners do, all of the training that went into race day, all the food that we love to have at aid stations, and our love for the public lands and wildlife and outdoors. And if you'll notice here in the picture that I've got on this slide, I wear a jersey that says Team Beef. And it never fails once I begin talking to some of those runners throughout the race that they always say, hey, Ryan, what is that Team Beef about? And I get super excited because they've just given me permission to talk about what I want to be an advocate for. It's not just running. As fellow runners, we've connected on that, but they want to ask me about what is beef and how does that fit into my diet as fueling as an endurance athlete. And if you take home nothing else tonight, I want you to remember, if you can connect with other people as a person first, you're much more likely to have a productive conversation, especially when you might disagree on things. And I'll repeat that. If you can take time to connect with other people first as a person, you're much more likely to have a better conversation. And that can be a huge key to being a stronger advocate. So I told you I'd ask you why. Why should we be involved in agriculture advocacy? So this is something, grab out, a notepad, a pen, pull out your phone and maybe write a few notes that come to mind. What comes to mind when I ask you, why should we invest in being involved in agriculture advocacy? And I'll start off by saying advocacy is not new and criticisms of agriculture are not new at all. If you look at the early 1900s, Upton Sinclair wrote a book, came out that's called The Jungle. If you haven't listened to it or read to it, I encourage you to do so. The Jungle was very critical of the packing industry at that time, the handling not only of the animals, but the laborers and the people that were involved in working in those things and the impacts that that had on society. And ever since then, we've continued to see criticisms of agriculture, modern agriculture, and the innovations that we adapt. And you fast forward all the way to 2000s, 2009, those early 2000 years, a documentary called Food Inc. came out, and it captured the headlines. It captured the emotions of people that were wanting to learn more about what they were putting into their bodies and how it was raised and how those animals were cared for. And this film, this documentary, focuses on huge criticisms of modern agriculture today, trying to paint family farmers and ranchers as corporations that are out to profit off of the land, profit off the animals at any cost. And there are several inaccuracies in that film. Today, that film continues to be used in classrooms across the countries and being used as educational material about food and how it's raised today. And it was also about this time where documentaries started to get more popular, that people involved in agriculture realized that we could jump on social media and be a part of these conversations, that we didn't just have to listen to them, but we could be part of the conversations and share our voice out there. And so this caption that I've also got on this screen is a rancher in South Dakota. His name is Troy Hadrick. And at the time, Yellowtail Wines, which he is a fan of, made a huge donation to the Humane Society of the United States, a huge activist organization that showcases itself, bills itself as wanting to care for the animals. Well, Yellowtail Wines made that huge donation, and Troy was not very happy with that because they were donating to an organization that actively works against the way and the lifestyle of a rancher in South Dakota or all across the country. And so Troy got on and made this short video, posted it on YouTube, where he said he was not happy with the donation that Yellowtail made to HSUS, and said that he was done with Yellowtail Wines until they rescinded that donation, and realized why that was not right. And so he poured out his bottle of wine there in the calf pen on his ranch in the snow. Well, this got thousands and thousands of views. And Yellowtail reached out to him and they had a conversation, and the organization learned more about why that donation was actively working against farmers that Yellowtail also wanted to support. And so that was kind of a change in the guard, and where we realized that we could be part of these conversations and make an impact. And so when I ask you, why is advocacy important, that kind of feeds into it, because today we see all types of bad information, all kinds of conversations happening about food and agriculture online, in print, in documentaries, whatever that might be. You've got people online like the Food Babe who tell us all of our food is made of chemicals and we should avoid the things that we can't pronounce. We got Dr. Oz on syndicated television who uses his title as a doctor to tell people that they should fear their food and how it's raised, but then buy the products that they want to sell. Then you got documentaries like Cowspiracy, along with Food Inc. If you haven't watched Cowspiracy, I encourage you to watch that. That one focuses specifically on beef cattle and how they are raised and some of the myths and perceptions that are out there about the work that we do on a daily basis. You've got restaurant chains like Chipotle that jump right in on this, building big campaigns about this. We see headlines online and news articles about antibiotics in the meat supply, or it can even be a newspaper clipping like this from San Francisco. It says, to all you hunters who kill animals for food, shame on you. You should get your meat from the grocery store where no animals were harmed. Like, People do believe these things. This is the information that consumers see out there. And if we're not involved in these conversations, if we're not sharing our story and responding to these things, they have no opportunity to learn otherwise. And so as an advocate, how can you jump online when you see an article out there that says beef is worse than transportation as far as greenhouse gas emissions? How can we use our science from our research to be able to have that conversation? Or maybe it's as simple as joining a local network of bloggers, a community-based group, and answering simple questions such as, what do these labels on my meat mean? Or if you want to be like me and be a crazy athlete, how can you get out there and share your story of that? And so I've got a picture here alongside a team beef athlete standing alongside another athlete in a jersey that says "Go Vegan." Now, do you think that they agree on dietary and eating patterns? Probably not. But I throw this picture up here to make a point, and note that they're both still smiling. You don't have to agree with everyone on everything in order to have a civil discussion. That's key, and that's hard for folks today. You don't have to agree with everyone on everything in order to have a civil discussion. So let's dive in a little bit deeper into how do you do negativity? How do you handle some of those things? So I want you to pull out your phone, open a browser window, whatever it might be, and I want you to pull up your Google search engine. Because today, as consumers of information, wherever we may be, we turn to search engines online. We turn to Google when we have questions, and we ask those questions. And whatever pops up is the information that we consume. So I got a question here that is frequently asked when it comes to beef and cattle is, does feeding corn harm cows? Some of those documentaries that I just talked about, there's lots of books out there, videos out there where people who are against what it is that we do, they say that feeding corn to cattle harms them. It's dangerous to them. And so when a consumer goes on there and asks that question, which many do every single day, what types of articles do they find? So I've pulled up a couple of screenshots of what I found when I pulled this on my phone. And Google often show like an answer to a question right off the top. And you'll notice that this one is from my website, my blog, beefrunner.com. And I answered this question. And it's not just on my phone that this shows up. It shows up on several of your search engines as well. It says, does feeding corn, it is part of a good diet for cattle. And I explained a little bit of that as my nutrition education background. If you keep scrolling down and you flip through some of those questions, it shows you what questions people are also asking related to that. And then it shows you other related articles that are helping to answer some of those questions. And you'll see a lot of different articles from a lot of different sources. Some of them, like mom.com, is a parenting blog, and being able to, where parents go to ask questions about their food or whatever it is that they have questions about, about the things that they're giving their kids. And this one says, feeding corn to cattle causes health issues, not only for the cattle, but us as well. And then you see news outlets that are answering this question as well. But as those of us involved in agriculture, we're more likely to see articles from university sites, extension sites, whatever that might be, agriculture related publications, because Google knows we're going to see some of those things. But most consumers don't see those. They see articles like this PBS, a news outlet. Michael Pollan, he's going to say that no, feeding corn is not natural to cattle. We're going to see a lot of other things that say it's very dangerous to feed cattle. As a cattle nutritionist, I know that's not true. I know that corn and all kinds of plants and plant byproducts can be great nutrition for cattle and help them to have a healthy diet. There's lots of options and choices out there. But I kind of want to dive into this because this is what consumers see when they ask questions online. And the question is, how do we get more of our articles up there in the search results when people are asking those questions? And we have no chance of those answers being there for people if we don't join those conversations. If we don't put that information out there, our perspectives, our stories as advocates, if we don't ever put that out there, people have no chance of being able to see that. So I want to dive into the three keys that I've got for you on being a stronger advocate. These are three questions that I want you to ask yourself, write these down, and do a little bit of homework and studying on some of these things to help you to be a stronger advocate, to help you to zoom in. How can I have an impact? How can I find my niche where I can be effective and answer people's questions? And that first question that I want to ask you is, who's your audience? Who's that audience that you want to reach? Who's that audience that could be looking to you as a source of information when it comes to agriculture, beef, or cattle, whatever that might be? And to be able to do that, be specific in painting a picture of a type of person that you want to reach. Maybe it is a person in your life who always comes to you with these questions. So think about that, because a lot of the times I have people in agriculture saying, Ryan, I have no way to connect with urban consumers. You know, I live out in rural America and I don't, or rural part of the country, and I don't have an opportunity to connect with people in urban areas. But keep in mind, we are people too. So if you can be specific and paint a picture of a person that would be in your audience, a person that would look to you as a good source of information, you can have a better idea of how you're going to talk about things and what you're going to talk about, what kinds of questions you can answer. So boil it down. So when I ask myself this question, I think, okay, I want to reach other trail runners. I have a really good opportunity to have conversations with those folks who are from suburban and urban areas, and I want to reach them. So what do I have in common with them? So I want to paint that picture. You know, usually it's a male in his 30s, and he's young in his profession, young in his career. He's got a young family. He's putting in lots of hours at work, trying to get ahead. And when he comes home at the end of the day, he's trying to bring money home to put food on the table for his kids. They've got all kinds of activities on weeknights. They've got weekend activities, and lots of demands on their time. And at the end of the day, they're trying to find time to put in their training for the next and upcoming race or event. And they're trying to ask questions like, what can I eat to help to fuel my performance? So I'm going to help paint a picture of all those things. And then I'm going to ask, okay, what do I have in common with them? How can I talk about those things in my social media presence? How can I use those things to build that bridge and find those mutual interests that we have? And then keep diving into some of those things. And one of those things that you want to ask is, what questions do they have? How do I find out? Are they asking, does corn harm cattle? Is beef nutritious? Is beef a good source of nutrition for my plate? What type of beef should I look for? And one of those keys to find is not only Google and Google Trends, where you can go and find some of those things, but one of the unique sites that I found is answerthepublic.com. Answerthepublic.com goes and curates questions that people are asking search engines on specific keywords. So you can go in there and type in agriculture, beef, cattle, whatever that might be, and it gives you a whole pinwheel, a whole list of questions that people are asking. And those are great questions that you can start answering on your social media presence and your conversations, whatever that might be, and give you a better idea of what your audience might be looking to you for. So that's the first step, is finding out who it is that you want to talk to, who it is that is looking to you for more information when it comes to beef and cattle. The second lesson that I've learned and tip that I have to share with you is to learn to establish your voice. What is your voice? What is your persona? When we're engaging in online conversations as an advocate or engaging with audiences in our communities, you have a first impression. You have a persona that they think of, a character that they think of when they think of you and when they're interacting with you. And so you need to ask yourself, what is that voice? What do they think of when they picture me? And a lot of the times I find advocates that are very intimidated to start because they're like, well, I don't know what that voice is. I don't know what my persona will be, what will my brand be online. And they spend a lot of time working on that. And my advice to you is just get started, because your online presence, your presence as an advocate will evolve over time. And that's okay. In fact, that's a really good thing, because that shows that you are learning how to better connect with your audience and answer the questions that are out there. So these are a few examples of how my personas and my online brand have evolved over time. So I started off in grad school, or undergraduate school actually, and I got really frustrated that I was writing long papers and they were just getting turned in, writing about beef and cattle and the current industry issues that we have, and they were sitting in a notebook, sitting on my hard drive after I turned them in, and they weren't going anywhere. So I started publishing those things on a blog. Sitting in the pasture is kind of where I found my escape, and so that was the title of my blog. And then I moved up to the Rocky Mountains in Wyoming and worked on a ranch up there. And my family was super excited because I didn't grow up where there were any mountains, and they wanted to see what I was doing. Well, I didn't have any internet service. And so once a week, when I did go to town, I uploaded a blog and said, this is what we did this week. We moved these cattle here. We worked on these water and irrigation projects this week. And I just started posting some pictures and some 500-word entries. And before long, I was getting comments and questions from people all across the country, from New York, Los Angeles, wherever it might be. And they were asking me, hey, that's really interesting. Can you tell me more about that irrigation? Or, wow, I didn't know that you raise cattle in the mountains. Tell me more about that. And that's where it started to dawn on me that people were interested in things that we think are commonplace. We think that are everyday activities when we're involved in agriculture, when we're raising cattle, raising beef, whatever that might be. And if we're sharing these stories, people can be really interested in learning about our everyday activities. And so in March of 2010, my brand began to evolve. And I began to realize that there was something here in telling our stories. And so in March is National Agriculture Month, and specifically at the end of March, usually around spring break, is National Agriculture Day. And so everyone's talking about Agriculture Day and all the facets around that. And there was a question that was posted online, I think it was Twitter at the time, and said, why are you proud of what you do? Why are you proud to be a part of what it is that you do? And so I asked myself that. I said, well, why am I proud to be a part of agriculture? And I was working for Working Ranch magazine at the time and writing for their site. And so that was my entry that week. And I said, well, why am I proud to be a part of agriculture? And I explained why I was. Well, I had hundreds and hundreds of responses from people. People were sending me emails with writings on why they were proud to be a part of agriculture. And it really honed in and connected with them. And it really struck a chord, and people wanted to share these stories. And so my brand evolved into Agriculture Proud, because I said, I'm proud to be a part of agriculture, and we've got these stories to share. And so my brand evolved from sitting in the pasture to Agriculture Proud, telling the stories of people involved in agriculture all across the country and sharing that. And that evolved over the next several years, and being able to tell stories from people all across the country, and wound up in me being recognized as Advocate of the Year by several different trade industry organizations, and being able to share some of those stories. And that evolved and continued to ring true with so many people. People were using the quotes that I was posting and asking others to tell their story. Why were they proud to be a part of agriculture? Launched a podcast series and hit national and international publications. Even Canadian publications today can still continue to use I am ag proud as part of their campaigns. And I think that that's incredibly cool to have been able to ask a question that resonates with so many people still more than a decade later. But along the way, a couple of years ago, I asked a question that I'm fixing to pose to you here in a minute. And I said, am I connecting with my audience? Is this connecting with the people that I want to reach outside the choir? Because that's something I hear from advocates so often is, Ryan, how do I reach beyond the choir? I don't want to just talk to other farmers and ranchers and members of agriculture. I want to talk to people in urban and suburban areas as well. And so that's when I asked myself, okay, how can my brand continue to evolve to ensure that I'm doing my best to reach people outside beyond the choir, those people that were those runners that I had something in common with. And so I asked myself, what are my 3 buckets? What are my 3 topics? So this is something I want you to write down, maybe write down a couple of these questions, or what are topic areas that you can discuss, that you can incorporate as part of your advocacy or your online presence or your advocacy work that can help you in reaching beyond that choir, reaching people that are not involved in agriculture. What are those mutual interests? Think back to when you just defined, okay, who's your audience, and built out a character of them. What were those mutual interests that you had there? And where are they reaching out and asking questions? What online sites do they have a presence on? What are they using most? And when you're looking at these things, define, okay, what are 3 buckets of topics that I can talk about? And when you're doing that, agriculture will not always be your lead. Agriculture sometimes is, we're very passionate about it, and it's something we talk a lot about, but should it always be your first bucket that you're discussing? So when I did this exercise, I looked and I said, okay, well, Ryan, what are your 3 buckets? Well, obviously I love beef, agriculture, cattle. I'm going to continue to talk a lot about those things, and that can be new information that I can share with the audience that I want to reach. But what's more than that? Well, my second one is running. I spend a lot of time putting into training, go to races all throughout the year. In the last couple of years, I've done 30 ultra marathons. I put in a lot of hours and a lot of calories training, do a lot of adventures on trails around the area, and talk a lot about what's happening in the running world. And so that can be my second bucket. My third bucket is travel. Pre-COVID, I was traveling 110, 120 flights a year, traveling all over the country, not just for work, but anytime that I had a free weekend, I was traveling to national parks, new areas to be able to explore. I love to see the history of the places where I'm traveling. And so I talk a lot about travel and the news that's happening there, and connect with other aviation enthusiasts who want to talk about the newest model of plane or the newest destinations and what's happening in the airline world. So my third bucket is travel, so I can connect with those other people out beyond the choir. So when I'm talking about those things on my Instagram feed, my Twitter feed, whatever it might be, and connecting with other travel enthusiasts, talking with other runners and athletes about what's happening in the endurance world, I can talk about those things. They come to me because we have those mutual interests. And then when they see me post about agriculture and answering questions that are as simple as, what's a cattle guard and how does it work, that they can learn something new. And I get really excited because when I've connected with them, they see me posting those things. I get direct messages saying, hey, Ryan, I cooked a steak tonight and I thought about you. That is incredible. That is what fuels me in continuing this advocacy work, knowing that I'm reaching people that have no other connection to agriculture. We're connecting on those mutual interests outside of agriculture, and they're excited to tell me, hey, Ryan, I cooked a steak tonight because I thought of you and the information that you had shared and showed me, hey, you know what, I don't have to be worried about eating beef and heart disease or high cholesterol, whatever that might be. And so this was a huge groundbreaking in the evolution of my brand and being able to reach beyond the choir. Is defining 3 topic areas and how can I incorporate those in my advocacy. So when I'm thinking about this, and one of the biggest things is your presence can continue to evolve. Don't be afraid to share your enthusiasm and your personality. Let that personality shine through. People want to connect with other people. And if you can share that as part of your advocacy, you can connect with people beyond the choir. Don't be afraid to promote yourself and what it is that you're doing. I hear from a lot of advocates, well, I don't want to share such and such information about what we're doing with our cattle. Well, the things that we're doing every single day, those are the things that people are interested in learning more about. And engage with your audience. You defined your audience, you define your mutual interests. Well, you have to talk about things that are other than agriculture. So how can you use those 3 buckets to help to guide you to do that? And finally, the third lesson that I've learned the hard way that I have to share with you today is how you say it matters. How you say it matters. So in 2011, I had the opportunity to begin writing for CNN. CNN is a publication, a news site that has global reach, an international news site, and generally has a more liberal audience than what those of us in agriculture are used to connecting with. And it was about this time that there was a lot of conversation and discussion about hogs and gestation crates and how that was cruel and how we needed to evolve that. And on CNN, they ran an article talking about that. And there was tons and tons of comments about how awful farmers were and how they were shoving them in these cages and being cruel to them. And I commented and I said, gestation crates are one tool that farmers use, and farmers are working every single day to be able to provide the best care that they know how, and they have the tools to be able to use when they're raising and caring for their animals. And I said, there's the room in the discussion for can gestation crates continue to evolve, but please know that farmers are doing the best that they can. And I got hounded on, lots of people telling me how I didn't know what I was talking about. But the next day I opened my inbox and there was an email from CNN, a CNN editor, and I said, oh, what did I do? And the editor said, hey, I really appreciated your positive comment and the CNN negativity. Would you like to write for CNN and share some of your perspectives as a farmer? I said, wow, absolutely. So I had the incredible opportunity for several years to write for CNN, to be able to share stories of what farmers were doing and what farmers wanted to consumers to know about how we're raising cattle and what's in the beef and what's happening on our farms and ranches that ends up being the food on our plates. And so I had that incredible opportunity to be able to do that. And with that came some negativity. And when I learned as I went through these things that how you say it definitely matters, because each of these articles got hundreds and hundreds of comments. And a lot of them were telling me that I didn't know what I was talking about. That isn't really how it happens in the food supply chain. And I got a kick out of that because they're like telling a farmer that if we don't know anything about farming. And I certainly don't need to go on and tell them that they don't know how to do their jobs either. That's kind of our instinct, right? But how I could phrase things could make a huge impact in how that message is received. And it can also be a huge distraction from your core message. And these are a couple of examples of that. Editor asked me to write about what farmers and ranchers were doing during the winter when a couple of winter storms were sweeping across the continent. And so I wrote, here's a collection of things that farmers were doing during the winter in different areas of the country and different crops, different livestock. And the editor would take my articles and edit the headline, the title to be a little different, and choose out of my photos, which was the headline photo. Well, this example here on the left, frostbite on their teats and other cold weather farming, because I talked about how farmers that were calving or dairy farmers were dealing with frostbite on the cow's teats. Well, I also had what I thought was a pretty cool photo of this bull in the snow, and it was a pretty cool thing. And the editor posted this as the headline photo. Well, all of the comments that ended up on that article focused on bulls don't have teats. You don't know what you're talking about. And that photo and the placement of it completely distracted from the message that I was trying to share for that. Also in 2012, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Texas was enduring an exceptional drought of historic proportions. Pastures that would be completely grass were dried up in dirt. We were having to haul in all kinds of water and feed for our cattle, and people were complaining because their cars were getting dirty because of the hay truck that they were following. And so I shared how the drought was impacting farmers and the food supply. And the editor titled this Praying for Rain in the Arkansas Drought, because one of my closing lines was, well, at the end of the day, we'll pray for more rain and do everything we can to take care of our livestock and our land. And CNN's audience is not a conservative audience. They're rather liberal. And people got tied up on that headline, praying for rain in the Arkansas drought. And they told me that I shouldn't tell them to pray, that I shouldn't force my religion on them. And that one line, that one title, distracted from the message that was going on for several people. And so it can be critically important when you're writing online that you're looking from the perspective of your audience. That's why I started with define your audience and who's reading your information, and understand how they're approaching the topic, what their background is, what their interests are, because that can help you to evaluate how you are phrasing things, how you are saying things, and putting it into terms that will resonate with them and not distract from the message that you're trying to share. And one technique in being able to do that, especially when people disagree with you or they're asking you questions, maybe challenging you, is to use the 2 C's to form your message, whether that's a tweet, a quick text back and forth, or a longer conversation face to face. Let them know you care about the topic, about their concerns, before you give them the facts, the figures, and the science. Let them know that you care about the topic too. If you care about the well-being of the animals that are in your care, or the sustainability of the land, having clean air, clean water, whatever that might be, safe food, say that. Draw that mutual connection. Hey, that's a good question. I care about that too. Lead off with that. And then when you build that connection, when you acknowledge that you care about that topic too, that that's important to you as well, then you can dive into how you address those concerns. Maybe it's a fact, a figure, some science, some information, but don't dive in deep with like piling on, here's all the information about why you're wrong. Don't do that. You have to build that connection first, that trust with them, and letting them know that you care, letting them know that you hear their concerns before you start telling them how you are capable can make a huge impact in how your message is received. That can be our instinct to dive in like, well, actually, you're wrong. Beef cattle are only responsible for 3% of greenhouse gas emissions. Cattle are not as bad as transportation. That's our instinct to jump right to that. But if we first take a step and say, hey, that's a good question. As a farmer myself, I care deeply about ensuring that this land and our resources are around for the generations to come. And this is how we do it on our farm every day. That can make a much greater impact in how your message is received if you frame your responses in that way. And so when we're talking about how your message is received, a couple of things that I've learned and how we jump into some of those things and how we say it, write about timely events, write about things that people are talking about. If there's a trending hashtag, if there's a trending news story, a trending video on TikTok, join in that conversation. Talk about the things that other people are talking about, but stick to your experience. I'm not a hog farmer, but I can say, hey, the hog farmers I do know are, using gestation crates and using the tools that they best have. And so we can talk about some of those things. I'm not a chicken farmer. I'm not a poultry farmer. And it's okay to say, you know what, I don't have an answer to that, but I know someone who does. And so let's connect with them and let's both learn together. You don't want to try to defend everyone, and you can really back yourself into a corner if you try that. When it comes to negativity, and when I was writing for those CNN articles, and there's lots of negativity out there, I went in and I responded to lots of comments, but I wasn't responding to the negative commenter, whether that be someone from in our industry or a consumer reading the article. I didn't go and try to fight it out in an online comment section. That never ends well. The saying is, you don't want to roll with pigs in the mud because they enjoy it, and you'll both come out covered in mud, right? Respond to those negative comments for the benefit of the people watching. For every person that commented on those CNN articles and told me how I didn't know what I was talking about or disagreed with me, there were hundreds of other people that were watching and not commenting. And so go on there and respond to those people that have legitimate concerns or raising concerns, but respond to the benefit of those watching. And then in the conversation, if the other person's just interested in fighting it out. And please respond with passion. If you are passionate about something, use that passion and share that, because that resonates with other people. We want to connect with other people. We're passionate about the things that we are. But when you get heated about something, when you get really emotional about something, don't push send. Don't push post in the moment. Don't feel like you have to respond right away. Write it out right in the moment, but sleep on it, or have someone else read it for you. Just say, hey, can you gauge where I'm at on this? How does this, come across to other people before you post it? So right in the moment, don't feel like you have to respond immediately. You can sleep on it and respond the next day. So as we wrap up here, a couple of best practices, and I want to get to a couple of your questions. Some guiding principles, best practices when you're engaging as an advocate online or conversations face-to-face. These are some ways that you can engage in social media and be productive with it as an advocate. Utilize social media and our online sources for information to find common ground. Connect with other people on those mutual interests, those other two buckets once you've mapped those things out. Ask questions. Don't just put out information, but ask questions. People love to share their information, especially on topics that they're interested in as well. So ask questions. This works really well on Twitter. I go and I post over my morning coffee a question that's on my mind and get engaged in lots of people asking questions like, why do you tag your calves? Or what kind of beef do you enjoy? What are you looking for in the grocery store when you go these days? Ask questions and engage in dialogue that way. Give personal examples. Facts and figures are nice, but emotion rules. Emotion changes minds, science doesn't. So when you have a fact or a figure about raising cattle, raising beef, sustainability, nutrition, whatever it might be, you can be much more effective in sharing that if you illustrate it with a personal example. So when I say, you know what, hey, I enjoy beef as part of a healthy and balanced diet, it can be a 3-ounce serving or about the size of a palm of my hand or a deck of cards. That's, that can be 25 grams of protein on your plate. That illustrates that just one serving of beef for that 25 grams of protein by saying, hey, it's going to fit in the size of the palm of my hand or a deck of cards. It's going to illustrate that and how you incorporate that into your diet. You can also use social media and online sources to stay informed, not just getting out there and joining in the banter, but that's where people receive their information today. So utilize that to find out what other people are talking about. Hit that trending tab and see what trending hashtags, trending conversations are happening out there. Some things to avoid. Don't throw insults or make negative comments about someone's intelligence. That never ends well. That never ends up in a good conversation, right? I hear a lot from members of the agriculture community saying those ignorant consumers, they need to be educated. Those stupid consumers don't know anything about beef. Someone needs to educate them. How does it make you feel when somebody comes up to you and says, you need to be educated? You say, yeah, I do. But oftentimes we get defensive and we're not open to a conversation. We don't like people doing it to us, so why do we do it to others? That's something to avoid when you're online and joining in conversations. And don't repeat false or negative information. Right? Don't repeat fake news, as the term is these days. So a rule of thumb that can help you to identify some of this is if something evokes a strong emotional response, stop, verify the information before you go and share it. And finally, don't amplify opponents' voices. I think I've got a little bit of a rhetorical question here, but an example from today and when we are doing this, we might possibly be doing this, is are we amplifying the message of fake meats or alternative proteins? In the beef community, are we drawing more attention to those alternative proteins than what they are in market share at a restaurant or a grocery store? You know, that happens when we place more emphasis and raise awareness of some of our detractors or our opponents, whatever that might be. Ask yourself, are you doing that rather than sharing the message that you want to be out there and for people to hear? So I asked this is kind of your homework, is how will you be an advocate? How can you take some of these lessons that I've learned along the way, and how can you incorporate these into your skills and your work as an advocate for the beef community and be stronger today? So my final word that I have for you is communication is a two-way street. Advocacy is a two-way street. It's not just putting information out there, but you really have to work at interacting and engaging with your audience. And so for every message that you put out there, are you sending two messages out there, asking people questions, wanting to know what it is that they have to say in consuming that information? And so think about that as you go out and you're involved with people in your community or you're jumping online and social media, it's a two-way street. Make sure that you're not just sending out information, but you're taking it in as well. So with that, here's how you can get a hold of me tonight after the meeting or whenever. If you've got any questions, you can shoot me an email, ryan@beefrunner.com. Find me on any social media as beefrunner, or you can look up my website and blog at beefrunner.com if you want to follow up with any questions. And with that, I'm more than happy to take any questions that you may have and answer some of those here if you've got those in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ryan. That was awesome. Lots of great information that you shared with us, and I'm sure we can all take a lot of advice from that, as I know a lot of us probably get information that we see on social media or things that we find that a lot of us get passionate about and maybe want to respond a little too fast. I know I probably have in the past, where we do need to just take a step back and take a breath and maybe sleep on it before we answer, or ideas like that, and lots of ideas on how we can get started for sure. So I'll give it a minute in the chat and the questions wise for people getting ready. But I think one of the questions I have a lot of the time is like there's always lots of information that's coming out and news articles and things like that I find like I constantly um, things that I know that I want to share and along with those lines and put it on social media and constantly like that. Um, do you ever get to the point, or do you ever find that how do I know that people aren't getting sick of me yet when I'm posting this? My friends that aren't in agriculture and I'm their farm friend and I'm posting it. Do you ever get to that point where you're just like, maybe I need to back off? Am I posting too much? When's the point where they might be thinking, oh, it's Beth posting another thing about beef farming again? Is there ever that point? Do you ever kind of know when there's a line when maybe you should be maybe taking a step back, or any advice on that front?
Yeah, I say these things, these are lessons that I have learned the hard way. I've been there. And so I want to share some of these experiences with other people. And I've absolutely been that token agriculture fan. I know Ryan's got another beef and cattle, and I still probably am today to some extent. And I think that that's where defining my three buckets came into play. So I'm not just talking about agriculture, but I'm also talking about other things that other people talk about. and other people discuss. And so I'm sharing those stories when it comes to running and when it comes to travel and whatever that is. I hear from a lot of people involved in agriculture. No, Ryan, I'm a farmer, I'm a rancher 24/7. Well, I hate to say it, but you're not, right? We are involved in other things. And so you can get engaged in those other conversations, and defining those three buckets and incorporating those into your advocacy work, whatever you're posting online, can help work toward that and being able to connect with other people on those other topics. And so that's I think that's one of the keys in being able to do that.
Perfect. Oh, and here we go. We're starting to get our questions in. All right. Okay. So you mentioned that you wouldn't hold back in sharing the mundane. How do you deal with the dilemma about sharing some of the less glamorous moments of farming, the days you might be slogging through the mud or saving the calves from the cold, etc.?
Yep. So I've worked in several large feed yards, and we have a small feed yard here where I'm at now. And if you want to see routine, I think the only thing that's more routine and daily mundane and working in a feed yard is, I give mad respect to dairy farmers that they milk twice, three times a day, do the same rotation, and often the cows come in the same order every single day. But you know what? That's a story in and of itself. That, hey, we're out here, we're doing the same thing every single day. I'm feeding cattle at the same time every single day, and ensuring that we're going through that same routine, because that's what they need to make sure that they're sharing some of those things. And when it comes to, if there's mud, treatments and a head gate, whatever that might look like, some of those things that might not be too glamorous, I think that's where backing up and saying, okay, who's my audience? What context are they coming to this conversation with, and how might they perceive things? That can help you to better identify some of those opportunities. And when you want to take a picture of some of those things, it's probably not always best to show the ugly side of things, the dirty side of things, whether it be that mud, or even something as simple as having an animal's head in a head gate, in a head chute, or a calf at a bunk line. Sometimes that can be perceived as, oh, they're keeping that cow in a cage. Like, that is that animal only in that head gate, or is that animal only standing at that bunk next to that bar? And so if you're going to share some of those things, think about your audience and how they're going to perceive things, and zoom out. So if you want to share some of those things, pick an angle where you can have more context around it, where it's got that empty pen behind it, where it's got the entire chute, or where that might be. That's better sometimes to maybe show, like, the vaccine bottle or the syringe or your notepad, and how you're treating some of those animals. So find different angles or different perspectives to share of that element, or zoom out so people can see more of that pen, that it's not just cattle at a bunk, but there's cattle in a large pen, with dry areas in the pen, and they're all choosing to be in that corner. So that can be really a way to add context. Or sometimes some of those things are things that should be videos, and so you can pan around the pen so they're not just, show that they're moving out from the bunk and not just at that thing. So always try to look for ways to add context or other perspectives to show the same thing, if you're uncomfortable
Yeah.
with that.
And I think that actually is a really good point, because a lot of the times we do miss that perspective. I remember one time we had a cow that she wasn't letting her calf suck, and so we had to put her in a head gate, and then I had to try to lift this 80-pound calf into a wheelbarrow to wheel her around to where the head gate is. And I'm thinking to myself this whole time, oh, like, man, I wish people could see me and how awesome I am wheeling this thing around. But when you think about it, if somebody were to just come in right then and see a cow in a head gate with me wheeling a calf kind of around her in a wheelbarrow, how bad would that look right then? So
Right, because
yeah, it's just the
even that calf in the
perspective.
wheelbarrow has been associated by activists with abuse, or
Yeah,
taking the calf away from their mother. So can you show, well, maybe not in the moment, but the bottle, with that
yeah,
you had with the milk in it or something like that? That might be a way to show a
yeah,
different perspective of that situation.
yeah. But it's all in your head, right? Because I thought I was being the best thing ever, but somebody who had a video of that would have thought I was the worst person in the world. But
Right.
yeah, and just to go off with that, another question, and you kind of mentioned this somewhat, but how do we keep our cool and be rational when dealing with those activists or trespassers or extremely naive viewpoints, when they're maybe kind of like right in our face, or directly, or how you were probably dealing with hundreds of them coming in? um, like, how did you not get kind of inundated and depressed, and just overwhelmed with it all.
Yep. So a couple of things on this is, so I don't want advocates, I don't want you to worry about the negative, and I don't want you to let that keep you from getting started. We see the negative, we have a fear of the negative and are afraid that that's going to happen and feel like we have to be prepared for everything. This doesn't happen to everyone. And if you have a bunch of negativity come your way, if you have activists that jump on one of your posts, that means you're doing something right. That means you're making an impact as an advocate. And then reach out to someone like myself, and I can help to walk you through that. I've worked with lots of advocates that have had anti-livestock agriculture activists, animal rights activists come and gang up and have an organized effort to comment on some of their Facebook posts, whatever that might be. And there are different ways to handle that. I say if you're on Facebook or wherever it might be, if it's your blog channel, that's your space. And so you can draw a line. And if they are giving, personal attacks, attacking your family, giving threats for harm, that's what the block button is there for, right? If they get on that, you can block it. Now, if they're kind of ganging up and it's not at that line where it is, personal attacks, but it's just lots and lots of negativity on there, use that mute button on Twitter. Instagram will let you hide different comments. Facebook will let you hide comments. And if you hide comments, they can still see it, but everyone else cannot. And so that doesn't fuel the fire because they don't think, they deleted my comment, they deleted my comment. But you can hide it so no one else engages with it and adds fuel to that fire. Another thing I suggest is to build your tribe. Do you have that circle of friends, your circle of fellow advocates? Lean on those peers so that when something like that happens, you can message them and say, oh no, what can I do? Or hey, can you come on here and leave some positive comments? Let's get some positive comments going here, whatever that might be. And that might help the conversation go into a better direction. So that tribe is a circle of peers, a circle of friends in this advocacy effort that you can lean on and help you during those different situations. So I've got a couple of friends that have me as a moderator on some of their Facebook pages. So if something like that happens and they're in the milking parlor or they're way out of service and negative comments start piling up on their post, I can jump on there on my phone and help to moderate some of that as well. So there are different tools like that that you can use to have a little bit of support during those times when those things happen.
Okay. What exactly programs or events or things did you go to kind of, was there anything that gave you a boost to get started with your website and your blog or anything like that to kind of help you with your first step into being an advocate? Was there anything that kind of helped you along the lines that way?
Yeah, so one of the sites I guess that I go to and I've gone to for a really long time is Social Media Examiner. So they are a group of experts in the kind of social media world that are always up on the latest changes, the latest updates, the newest features on any of the social media platforms. And so that's a group that I really encourage people to follow. And it's a non-agriculture group. So when it comes to these websites and social media platforms, I encourage you to also have in your wheelhouse not only folks that your tribe and your people in the ag industry that can help us to understand how do we tell this story about those calves at a bunk line or those calves in the chute, but also look outside of agriculture into those social media experts, those communication experts. So I've learned a lot from Social Media Examiner. There's a lot of good TED Talks out there. I kind of enjoy TED Talks. They're usually a different perspective than what I'm used to hearing, but a lot of them talk about communication. A lot of them talk about advocacy in different industries that I can learn from. But I also turn to YouTube. When it comes to WordPress, figuring out some of these tools, YouTube is full of tutorials. And you ask a question on YouTube, somebody has explained it. And if they haven't, there's your opportunity to learn about it and make a YouTube video about it. You wouldn't believe the number of things that are out there. Learn about WordPress plugins. How do you design some of these things? YouTube is an awesome place for that.
That's good, because I think that probably might be some of the things that maybe hold back some of the people who are looking to be an advocate. They're just not quite sure where to get started or how to get started. So I think that is actually a really good answer on that one as well. And then I think another question that I might have passed on to you, I can't remember if I did or not, is one of the ones that a lot of people may not be thinking about, but some of the negativity, and not to bring back to all the negativity, is one of the things that a lot of the times our advocates face is not necessarily from outside of our industry, but it's within our industry, that they'll get some of the negative feedback from producers that maybe don't agree with a lot of the stuff that they're talking about or trying to promote, or say, what's the point? There's no point in really trying to spread the message or anything like that. Do you have any advice on that front, or just kind of let it lie? What would you say the best advice is on that front?
But I think some of our harshest critics can be peers in the agriculture community, right? And that's going to happen in the coffee shop. It's going to happen in phone conversations. It's not just online. And social media tools just sometimes bring those conversations to a larger audience, whatever it might be. And so I'd encourage you to consider that, and don't be afraid to take some of those conversations to direct messages, private messages, if that might be. And kind of rule of thumb is respond twice, and if they're still interested in arguing and fighting you back, move on. Respond for the benefit of those watching and move on. When this is kind of, I get tied up into it too. I on Twitter several times have gotten caught up in the negativity from fellow people in agriculture. But when you're able to successfully just respond for the benefit of those watching, so those people are watching, here's what I want them to know, and move on from the conversation. People take note of that. People take note of when you're the bigger person in the conversation, when somebody's coming at you with negativity or an attack, and you're able to move on from that, you'll get direct messages. You'll get people taking note of being able to do that. And again, that's what your tribe is there for you. Say you've got this person coming after you, tap on someone's shoulder and say, hey, would you mind jumping in this conversation, or would you mind helping me out here? Do you have any advice? And that can be a really valuable tool.
Yeah, that's a really good point, is to have people that can kind of hop in and be your go-to for helping you come in from the back door there. No, that's a really good point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It doesn't look like we have too many other questions, unless anybody's got any final ones they want to pop in here before we go. But do you have any final points for us? Just some final advice?
Yeah, I think one more take home that I'd have for everybody is don't be intimidated by all of the options, and don't feel like you have to be everywhere. Pick one platform, pick one thing, and do it well. And when you're comfortable with that, then you can branch out and adapt another channel, adapt another social media platform, and adapt another advocacy route that you're doing with that. But pick one thing and do it well before you try to do everything. You can't be everything to everyone. So.
Perfect. That's awesome, Ryan. Thank you so much for taking the time out this evening and joining us. I know you had lots of great advice that I think most of us will probably take with us and hopefully apply to help us really help further our message better and get that out there. So thank you once again. I'm sure everybody really enjoyed it this evening, and hopefully we'll continue talking more in the future.
All right. Yeah. Thanks y'all for having me, and feel free to reach out at any time. Follow up if you've got any questions.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank y'all.